First YouTube video, had a conversation with Luke yesterday, one of my clients. He's kind of confused saying like, I don't see the value in getting long and strong hamstrings, right? And I'm trying to explain to him this whole concept of Usain Bolt and how he had the longest hamstrings. He wasn't tight, but they were really strong. What's the whole purpose of that? You can have the strongest hamstrings in the world, but when you break down as a football player, as a soccer player, if you're making a cut, right? If you're making a cut, more often than not, if you have some sort of tightness, it could be a tweak, it could be a tear. So how do we minimize that or get rid of the risk of injury? We got to lengthen and we got to strengthen. How do we do it at the same time? Good example, Jefferson curl, right? RDL. Seated good morning, same thing. The pike pulse, going full range. These are good examples. If you can't do this, but you can rep a Nordic curl, you're leaving room on the table for your 40 time. You're leaving room on the table for your jumping. Think about it. Think about jumping. Jumping is all posterior, right? If you can't explode the hips because you have tight hamstrings, you're lacking your vertical. Your vertical is here. It could be here. So a few things. Because if you're like Luke, if you're like somebody who has tight hips, who has tight hamstrings, a weak lower back, right? But you think you're strong. Like I can get under the bar right now and squat, but I know that my back is not good enough and it's gonna hinge at the bottom. I don't want that. I wanna have a good, strong base. After everything I just said, I think I'm gonna kind of circle back to where I was at, and it can relate to a lot of young athletes. The confusion that they have in some of the strength systems that they're involved in. I was a D1 football player. I played 2 years of college football, had a great time. It's just that the problem that I had such chronic hip and low back issues, right? And I didn't know how to address them. And I was part of a strength system that I really wasn't progressing and wasn't hitting new benchmarks. And so I was really frustrated and I didn't understand how to sort of progress or transform my body, right? And it wasn't until I actually stepped away from it and was like, you know what, I gotta do the research, right? I gotta figure out how I can knock off tenths off my 40 time, how I can increase the vertical jump naturally with the right training systems in place. Until I discovered ATG and full range training, I was, that's when everything changed. That's when everything changed. When I discovered ATG, when I learned full range of motion, joint health, being more resilient, training structural balance, right? Working from the ground up, all these principles, you can't lack them. So a big thing that I know now that I didn't was I was tight and I was kind of just looking for, let me give you an example. So I would go to the gym, right? And I was thinking, okay, I'm tight. How do I address the mobility that I'm having? And I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna go and hit, some partial range squats, right? So I'd be here doing partial range squats. This is before I knew anything. I'm doing partial range squats, right? That was part of my strength system. And then after, I'd be like, coach, I'd like to know some mobility routines I can get into. And then all I would do really is just some 90-90 drills or just try to stretch the hamstrings. And I didn't really have a route to get into mobility the right way. And so it wasn't until I discovered movements like a split squat or a seated good morning where I could start at a very, very easy level, right? Split squat. My split squat was insanely poor, and it's taken me over a year to get to that form, right? Perfect form. But the seated good morning is something that most people lack, right? And it actually gets elderly out of sitting issues. It actually is the biggest correlation between getting out of a sprint in a sprinter stance. If you're not comfortable here, if you can't hip hinge in a 40 stance, how are you going to be comfortable coming out of it, right? So if you want to break that down, right, the seated good morning is a perfect example, right? You're in this position and you're holding tension, keeping that back straight. You want to keep that back straight, right? You start with no weight. You start just doing the basic things, and then you slowly progress, right? I'm now at a point that I can go and do this with 95 pounds, no problem, with perfect form. Now, I'm not telling anybody to do this, but this is just to show you. My form is absolutely perfect. And I have no issue with it. But it wasn't until I started doing those movements that I noticed how much more I could get in my athleticism. I felt like I was just hitting plateaus. I ran a 4.840, and I felt like I couldn't get better than a 4.840. And I was like, what do I got to do, right? And I started doing this stuff, and I'm like, okay, if you really think about it, why do I suck at the 40-yard dash? Why do I have a shitty vertical? It's because you're uncomfortable getting into the actual position. You could talk about 90-degree squats or box squats or partial ranges of motion. There's a time and place for them. But full range is when you get extreme adaptation and you don't want to work through pain. So full range, extreme adaptation, but don't work through pain. Two things you want to focus on. So split squat, right? Here, full range, no problem doing it. I was now able to be comfortable, and the seated good morning, so split squat, seated good morning. I was now able to be comfortable in a sprinter stance, in a receiver stance, in, getting in and out of breaks. I was comfortable in the athletic position that everyone's taught. I was comfortable in this position. Usually you're tight here. You don't know what to do, and you're kind of lacking, you don't feel as though you're very dominant, The coaches will tell you, this is the most dominant position, but they don't show you how to be more dominant in it. So say you're in this position. I am so comfortable in it now because I don't have any tightness in my hamstrings. I don't have any tightness in my hip flexors or adductors, right? And it was only because of exercises like the split squat, seated good morning, lengthening the hamstrings with an elephant walk, right? It's not like, oh, I'm so advanced now, so why listen to me? No, all my clients that come in, extremely tight. They were like how I was. You just start at basic levels. Here, right? Just working here, right? Split squat, just working here. Very simple, right? Even a pigeon stretch, right? Good example of a pigeon stretch. 90-90 is great. You really want to open up that outer glute if you have any sciatica, any lower back pain. But, how do we progress it? Use no assistance. Actually strengthen that glute, right? You can start at a very low level using assistance. Up and down, actually really opening up that outer glute. Use less assistance as time progresses. I'm not going to say this is going to be a one fix or one step to get you out of pain or tightness or whatever immobile issues you're having. It's going to be a process, but that's the reason why you want to take this stuff and be consistent at it. It's not so much of, you do it a couple times, when you go to physical therapy and they kind of give you heat and ice and they give you one movement to do or two movements to do, and you do them and you see benefits for a few days. You go to a chiropractor, you see benefits for a few days, and they come right back. That was the constant battle that I was facing, and I was like, I'm not going to do it anymore. I got to figure out what's the exercises or the movements that I got to do that will relieve me of pain for the long term, not the short term, right? And the more I do them every day, I don't have any flare-ups. I don't have any tightness. I don't have any random pain. I can go and play sports and have fun and not worry about getting hurt because my joints are strong. All the muscles surrounding my joints, my ankles, my knees, my hips, shoulders, they're all very strong and flexible. And that's how you win. That's how you become more athletic. You got to be locked in.